This video is brought to you by my wonderful members and Super Chat sponsors. Click the join button to become a member. Hello, Mr. X. My name is Chris. The story I want to share with you and the Dreamers took place many years ago when I was living in Washington State. It was a hot summer, right after the end of my senior year of high school. We just got some relief due to a couple nights of good, heavy rain. Normally, this would have been a welcome change, but this time it really got in the way of a paintball trip my best friend Garth and I had been planning for our post-graduation shenanigans. Garth was spending the summer with my family and me out on our rural farm in Snohomish, Washington. We had 5 acres on a huge hill, most of it fenced off into a pasture for livestock like horses, sheep, and cows. When the rains came through, the hillside turned into muck, and my gravel driveway became a serious hazard. My mother had managed to get her truck stuck in it pretty often, so naturally, that happened when we were trying to get out one day. Seeing that catastrophe, Garth decided that he would try to squeeze his Firebird out past my mom's truck before the driveway deteriorated any further. His plan was to park somewhere overnight and sleep in his car, just to make sure we would be able to leave on time for our trip in the morning. He asked me to come keep him company because, according to him, he didn't want to be a black guy sleeping in a car in the middle of BFE. Even though I could have easily stayed in the house myself, it seemed the good friend thing to do, so I agreed. We gathered up a couple of blankets, some sodas and snacks, and our paintball gear, and went out to his car. He maneuvered his way past the useless husk of my mom's stranded Chevy truck. It took a bit of doing, but eventually, we got out of the driveway and rumbled on down the road. Our first thought was to keep close to home. We decided to park alongside the corner store near the bottom of the hill. We knew the owners well and spent a good chunk of our pocket cash there, on comics, ice cream, and the occasional girly magazine. So we figured if we got caught camping out in the car there, they'd be pretty cool about it. Unfortunately, we initially forgot about the number of times the windows and signs of the store had been shot out. Lots of little vandals out and about at night around there. When the thought occurred to me, we decided to relocate. Stray bullets aside, the store is built next to the old foundation of one of the first one-room schools in the valley. The place was pretty spooky at night anyway. We drove around a bit before pulling into the gravel parking lot of an old roadside barn. It was around 11 p.m. The rain actually slowed down a bit, leaving that eerie, misty gloom in its wake. You probably know the scene I'm talking about. A foggy road lined with woods on either side is not the best place to be sleeping in a car. It was too quiet. The barn's peaked roof was silhouetted by a nearly full moon against an overcast, dusky sky. Just behind it, about 10 or 15 meters to our left, was a steep embankment that dropped into a deep, dark gully that absolutely exuded creepiness. Despite all that, we actually stayed there. Honestly, it was a pretty good time at first. We joked around, drank a few sodas, plowed through our snack cakes and beef jerky supply, etc. Before too long, sleep had begun sneaking up on us. We shrouded ourselves with the fleece blankets we brought. I checked the door locks and dismissed the fact that I could no longer see through the fogged-up windows. Not seeing the otherwise haunting surroundings actually made it a bit more comfortable. Sleeping in a Firebird was already painful enough without the extra visuals. I wouldn't recommend it either way. I woke up a few hours later, catching the tail end of an unsettling noise coming from outside. I didn't hear enough of it to tell quite what it was, but I did hear enough to instantly have my senses alerted. It was like what I'd imagine I'd feel after hearing the howl of a predator, signaling to its companions, or the crackling of something stalking in the bush behind me. The windows had cleared up, revealing the gaping black maw of the gully that lingered just past the back lot where the old barn stood. The void seemed to almost pull our car towards itself. I shook off the initial creep factor of the strange noise, resituated my blanket, and eventually dozed back off to sleep. Minutes later, I was awakened again. My ears were suddenly overwhelmed with the most horrible cacophony of noise I'd ever experienced. My primal brain activated instantly, sending my system into fight or flight mode. I looked over at Garth to find him sitting straight up in his seat, eyes wide and face as ghostly pale as his brown skin would allow. The sound in my ears was unrelenting. I asked him, "Do you hear that?" He nodded, or at least I think he did, and we began scrambling around the cabin of the car, flinging the blankets off to double-check the locks. The sound got louder, closer, as if whatever the source was, it was clambering up the embankment below. It was absolutely awful. As I recall it, it seemed to be some twisted combination of canine barking or whining, and some other unknown yet God-forsaken creature with a disturbingly exotic range of vocal abilities. It warbled, cracked, and screeched in what was clearly a fit of pure, unadulterated madness. Of all the wild and or domesticated animal calls and sounds I had heard in all my years living in the valley, I had never heard anything approaching that. Garth fumbled with his keys while my eyes darted between the gully and the tree line. He struggled to get the key into the ignition, pushing through the fear-induced tremors in his hands. When the noises finally reached a crescendo, the Firebird's V8 engine roared to life, and the tires blew a shower of gravel behind the car as we hauled ass out of there. It was at that moment that my fears were confirmed. As we got further away from the location, the sound faded. That meant to me that the noise was not just in our heads, that there was something actually coming after us. We skidded down the twisted road back to my house. I knew we wouldn't be able to make it up the hill with all that mud flowing down. It wasn't worth trying and getting stuck, or even worse. At the same time, we didn't want to park somewhere out in the open either. We decided to head all the way into town and park out in front of my grandparents' bed and breakfast, where we sat wide-eyed until morning. My friends and I continued to hear those bizarre, haunting noises periodically throughout the rest of the summer. We even stumbled across an abandoned campsite in the woods, not far from the barn, where this originally happened. I could tell the place was a homeless camping spot of some sort, but we never saw anyone in the woods around there before. From where it was, we would have clearly seen it from the road in all the times that we've passed through that area, if people had been there. One night, I heard a motorcycle crash that was immediately followed by the bellowing sound of these howling things, as we took to calling them. Another night, my friends told me they were chased off the field they were using to play a paintball game. They said the noise was coming toward them, so they called me up on the walkie-talkies we used to use. I heard the familiar, terrifying sound again with my own ears, coming through the speaker. That was the only summer any of us heard those things. No one ever caught a glimpse of whatever they were, or even managed to identify any specific sounds among the madness. We never heard anything like that before or since. Anyway, thanks for listening, Mr. X. Sincerely, Chris. Alright, my friends. I hope you enjoyed that intriguing story. I'll get into my thoughts, then we'll check out what the dreamers listening to the live show have to say. Alright, so this is one of those stories that has so many possible answers to it, it's hard to pin down an opinion as to what's really going on behind the scenes. If we look at the individual elements of the story, maybe we can come up with some ideas. The first thing that comes to mind is a condition known as exploding head syndrome. If you haven't heard of it before, this might sound pretty intense, but I assure you it's not as bad as you might imagine, at least not physically. So, exploding head syndrome, otherwise known as EHS, is a very rare condition that is characterized by complaints of sudden loud noises or a sense of explosion in the head that usually occurs at the onset of sleep. Other symptoms might include rapid heart rate, headaches, sweating, fearfulness, agitation or anxiety, and even mild memory impairment. So if you look back at this story, EHS sort of lines up well with some of the events described. The thing is, only 6 people in recorded history have been diagnosed with it, as far as I've seen in my brief research that I did about this subject. The odds that 2 people would have this happen to them at the same time, I imagine, would be pretty far out there. Not as far out, of course, as some of the other possibilities that we will discuss. So with that said, let's move on to the more interesting and fun paranormal side. One possibility that comes to mind as far as explanations to clarify what may have been going on occurred in the first moment of real strangeness that Chris described. Before that devastating cacophony of noise, there was a more mundane sound that, although it did creep him out to an extent, it did not seem to cause the level of pain and confusion that the other following noises did. It made me wonder if perhaps there was something out there signaling that perhaps prey was in the area. Imagine a wolf or a dog howling to summon its pack after catching sight of an injured animal it would need help to take down. The first sound was the lone wolf in this example. The cacophony was the onslaught that followed the pack descending on its potential victim. Just something interesting to think about. Another thing I wondered about was the mysteriously hard to find population of homeless people living in the woods. Those people were known to inhabit the area, but nobody actually ever saw them, only evidence of their presence being there. I suppose their presence may have been known by the traces they left behind, but why weren't they ever encountered? What if there was something more to who or what those people living in those camps actually were? I look forward to hearing your theories. So, my friend, what do you think about this story? Do you think it was all in Chris and his friends' heads? Have you ever experienced anything like that, this quasi-exploding head syndrome with these cacophonous noises going crazy in your mind? What do you think about my theory about the homeless people in the woods? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. And in the meantime, for now, I'm going to open up the floor to the dreamers to weigh in. Remember, if you want a chance to have your question or comment show up in a future video, or to sponsor a video with a super chat, turn on notifications so that you catch the live reading and discussion. So, Creepy Clown Girl says, I've experienced what they did, and it's one of the stories that I shared with you. I don't remember getting any stories with you right now. Oh, you mean the ones that you sent me in the Google Doc. I haven't looked at those yet. I haven't gotten a notification about it. Maybe I need to check my email, but I do look forward to learning more about that. And thanks for sharing your story, my friend. Flip It says, I've experienced EHS, and I don't think that that's what they had going on there. In my case, it usually wakes me up in the middle of the night. It sounds like a gunshot or something large falling in the house. I believe my PTSD has a lot to do with it. Well, that doesn't sound very pleasant at all. I hope that you can get over that at some point in the future, my friend. I'm sad to hear you're dealing with that, but that does remind me of a situation. I'll read a couple more comments and then I'll explain something that happened to me when I was younger that I believe might be related to this. I'm not sure, but I think it might be. So Samantha says, homeless in the wild might have been there so long that it took over they were taken over by the animalistic part of their minds, and maybe they were extremely territorial. Yeah, that I wonder how many people it would take to create a locally deafening, terrifying sound or group of sounds that are not identifiable. Because like Philianoctis said, if it were wolves, those are very easily identifiable sounds, but these seem to be completely unintelligible. So I wonder how many people it would take to create like a physically incapacitated, nearly physically incapacitating sound. It's really, really interesting. All right, so Ambar says, nighttime nature noises are no joke. I like to stop in secluded roads on road trips and look at the night sky. And I've had my friends dive headfirst back in the car, losing a shoe because of strange noises. That's funny. That's a really, really awesome mental image of you being out there hanging out and a noise happens and the person just starts breaking out, trying to dive into the car to the point where their flip-flop or their shoe just flies off, and they probably just get in the car and say, you know what? Forget the shoe. Get us out of here. I can imagine that. But anyway, this has me thinking of something that happened to me when I was a kid, and I might have told this story before, but bear with me. So back in the day, I don't know if anybody's old enough to remember the Nintendo Game Boy. Wasn't the Game Boy Advance. It was, I think, maybe Game Boy Color, and I was playing The Legend of Zelda DX, which I believe was a remake of some type of remastering or something of A Link to the Past. I'm pretty sure that's the one it was. But I was playing that game and playing it excessively, like extremely excessively, to where every hour that I could, I was playing Zelda in my room, whether I'm, outside. Anytime I wasn't doing schoolwork, I was literally playing that game. And one night I went to bed, and I'm not sure if I got to sleep or if I woke up or if I couldn't sleep, but I suddenly started hearing this hellish noise, and it felt like my eardrums were going to burst. And as I was getting accustomed to hearing this, I was holding my head, I was curled up in a ball in my bed, and my brother was sleeping on the top bunk, I was on the bottom bunk, and it was so hard on my mind that I literally was in the fetal position with my hands over my ears, and I couldn't think, I couldn't focus on anything. I was just hearing this extremely harsh noise, and after a few minutes of that, I started listening to the noise carefully to see what in the world was happening. And the noise was literally all the music and sound effects of the game Legend of Zelda DX were all being... It's like you took the entire sound, all the sound bites from that game, and put them in a blender and turned the blender on and then poured that into my ear. That's what it was. It was all those sounds just constantly firing and going off and on. It was terrifying and extremely it was painful. And I wonder if that is some type of version of exploding head syndrome. And that's the only time that ever happened to me, thankfully. I would hate for that to happen again. I don't know what I would do right now. I would probably be able to figure it out, but it's not something I would welcome at all. So, yeah, that's definitely brings back a couple of memories there. Alright, so my friends, thank you for listening. That's going to wrap up this video. But before you go, if you're listening to this portion of the video, you're the exact dreamer I'm looking for. If you want me to know that you listened all the way to the end, type the code word into your comment down below. But this week it's going to be a little different. The code word is a howl. Whatever howl you want to do, however you want to spell it, however you want to communicate yourself howling in the comments, do that in the comment section down below. Be creative, entertain me. I entertained you, it's only fair that you entertain me in return for a little moment. Howl in the comment section down below so I can see you. Take care, my friends. See you next time. All right. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, don't forget to like and share. If you made it to the very end, you're exactly the kind of subscriber I'm looking for. Don't forget to turn on those notifications. That way, you can catch the live show and discuss the stories with me. Your input might even appear in my next video. Last thing, if you heard a code word after the story, type it in a comment down below so I know who the real dreamers are. Take care, my friend. Until next time.